I'm standing at the main gate, screaming into the call box while my baby turns blue in the back seat. An ambulance, lights flashing, is 10 feet away, but the HOA guard has his gun out, pointed at the EMT. His words, "This is private property. No entry without a pass." That moment will live in my head longer than I'll live on this earth. The way my voice cracked, the way the EMT looked at me, then at the gun, the way my wife was still on speaker in the front seat, begging to know what was happening, and the way Tom, the guy who once asked me if I could tune up his leaf blower, stood there like he was defending a secret bunker from terrorists instead of blocking life-saving help from a baby. Let me back up. 2 weeks earlier, I thought we'd finally made it. I'm talking white picket fence, well-watered lawns, the smell of barbecue wafting from backyards, and neighbors who wave with all their fingers. It was everything the real estate agent promised when he said, "Quiet community, perfect for families." What he failed to mention was that quiet didn't mean peaceful, it meant silence. And perfect for families only applied to families that never asked for help or broke the HOA's sacred commandments. Thou shalt not decorate before December honest. Thou shalt keep garbage bins hidden. And, most importantly, thou shalt not question Karen. Karen was the HOA president. Think if a Pinterest board and a courtroom sketch of Cruella de Vil had a baby and gave it a clipboard. She didn't run the HOA, she ruled it. And Tom, he was her personal lapdog. Official title, security. Unofficial vibe, mall cop dropout with a chip on his shoulder and a love for tactical gear. He bought off a discount site. His little shack at the gate had more cameras than a Vegas casino and less authority than a hall monitor. But that didn't stop him from acting like he patrolled a nuclear facility. The moment we moved in, they both sniffed us out like bloodhounds. First came the welcome packet, which included a 62-page handbook on shrub height and fence paint colors. Then the thinly veiled warnings. Karen showed up at our doorstep within a day, peeking over her glasses, already noting the color of our welcome mat, just making sure you're settling in properly. The smile didn't reach her eyes. I knew then I'd made a mistake, but we'd already paid the moving truck, and with a newborn and my wife fresh out of surgery, I didn't have the bandwidth to fight over shrubbery policies. What I did do was warn them. I told them about my daughter's condition. Her lungs weren't strong yet, premature birth. One good respiratory infection could knock her flat. The pediatrician had made it clear, if anything changed, call 911 immediately. Time would matter. I sent Karen an email, even dropped off a physical note at the gate, in case an ambulance needs access urgently. Please let them through. Tom nodded when I told him. Sure, man, got it. I should have known from his tone that it went in one ear and out the holster. Fast forward to that night, freezing cold. My wife had just put the baby down. We'd barely closed our eyes when the baby monitor started shrieking, oxygen levels tanking. My wife screamed. I scooped the baby up, wrapped her in a blanket, and flew to the car. 911 on speaker. The dispatcher told me the EMTs were en route. I told her I'd meet them at the gate. No way was I risking them getting lost in the maze of dead-end streets. Our HOA lovingly referred to as the Enclave. I parked right in front of the gate. Flashers on, engine running. My baby in the back, her lips turning pale. The ambulance appeared seconds later, tires screeching. Relief washed over me for a half second until Tom stepped out of his shack like a wannabe Marvel villain. His flashlight hit me first, then the EMT van. He squinted, walked toward the driver's window. Then God help me pulled his damn pistol. This is private property. No entry without a pass. The EMT tried reason, badge, credentials, medical emergency. Tom refused. Said protocol required a written authorization from the HOA for any emergency vehicle. He had to follow procedure. Meanwhile, I'm screaming the entry code into the call box. The EMT radioed dispatch. My baby whimpered and then went quiet. That silence, I still hear it. I jumped from the car, practically foaming at the mouth. I yelled, pleaded, cursed. The EMT looked trapped, torn between obeying a gun and saving a life. Then he made a move, tried to open his door to hop the gate. That's when Tom aimed the weapon directly at him and shouted, "Back up, do not breach." I was seconds from tackling Tom myself when blue and red lights flashed in the distance. The sheriff's SUV peeled in, skidded sideways, and 2 deputies stormed out with guns drawn on Tom. Apparently, 911 had looped them in when the EMTs called for help against an armed obstruction. By the time they disarmed him, calmed everyone, and opened the gate, too much time had passed. They rushed in anyway, but I already knew. The EMT came back out, shook his head, and muttered, "I'm sorry." I remember collapsing on the gravel, the cold biting into my knees, my hands bleeding from gripping the fence. I remember Karen pulling up moments later in her Lexus, stepping out like she was arriving at a wine tasting, gasping dramatically, and asking if this was about that email. She glanced toward the ambulance and said, "Was it really that urgent?" That was the moment I stopped being a grieving father and started being a ticking bomb. But here's the kicker. That wasn't the end of it. That should have been the lowest point, the crescendo. But no. The real shock came the next morning when the HOA Facebook group posted a message from Karen. It read, "We are reviewing last night's events and regret the inconvenience caused. Please know safety remains our top priority. We stand by our protocols." Attached was a photo of the broken gate. No mention of the baby. No mention of Tom pulling a weapon. No apology. And that's when I realized they weren't just cold. They were covering it up. That's when I opened my laptop, started digging through the HOA charter, and found something they definitely didn't want anyone to read. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I just sat on the living room floor, the baby's blanket still clutched in my hand, the house completely silent, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional rustle of wind against the window. My wife had finally fallen asleep upstairs after sobbing herself hoarse. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to. I just couldn't. Grief hadn't hit me yet. Rage got there first, and it brought paperwork. By 5:00 a.m., I was knee-deep in a rabbit hole that would have made a conspiracy theorist proud. HOA laws. Community charters, bylaws, even real estate development permits. I pulled every document I had on the place and everyone I could find online. I wasn't just looking to understand how Tom got away with what he did. I was looking to burn the whole damn structure down. Because here's the thing about people like Karen. They hide. Behind rules they write themselves. Then act shocked when someone uses those same rules to crush them. By 7, I had a fresh pot of coffee, 2 legal pads full of notes, and an idea forming that was so perfectly malicious it might actually work. But first, I needed help. I called James, an old friend, former paramedic like me, now working as a legal consultant for a firm that specializes in emergency responder rights. When he picked up, I barely said a word before he interrupted me. "I saw it on the news," he said. "That was your baby." I confirmed it. He went silent, then said, "I'm coming over." By noon, he was in my kitchen, flipping through every document I had like a bloodhound. I laid it all out. The HOA's refusal to open the gate, Tom pulling a weapon on a licensed EMT, the statement from Karen that didn't mention anything but a broken gate and safety protocols. And the real kicker, the guard wasn't even licensed. That's right, turns out Tom had no legal right to carry a weapon in that position, and the HOA had never completed the proper security licensing paperwork. His entire job existed in a gray zone so shady it could block out the sun. James sat back in the chair and said, "They're dead. They just don't know it yet." I smiled for the first time in 24 hours, not because anything was funny, but because poetic justice was starting to simmer. We spent the rest of the day building a case. I wasn't just going after Tom, I was coming for the HOA itself, the entire board. Karen, everyone who ignored warnings, covered up the tragedy, and tried to act like it was just another Tuesday. We drafted a public complaint, attached the 911 transcript, added screenshots of the HOA Facebook post, and the neighborhood group chat, where people were already starting to whisper. A few neighbors had DM'd me privately, saying what happened was unfortunate, but that I shouldn't let emotion cloud reason. One even had the audacity to say, "Maybe it's time to move on." I screenshotted every single one. Then we found the gem in the HOA charter. Buried under legalese was a clause that required any hired security to be licensed by the state, complete regular firearms training, and report use of force incidents within 24 hours. Not only had Tom never been certified, but no such report had ever been filed. And guess what? There was a financial clause too. Any violation of state safety compliance nullified their liability shield, meaning the individual board members could be personally sued. Karen's Lexus might be paid off, but her koi pond wasn't safe anymore. James connected me with a lawyer named Priya Shah, brilliant, ruthless, and, best of all, she absolutely despised HOAs. Her specialty, civil liability in cases involving public service obstruction. When I told her the story, she didn't blink, just asked, "Are there security cameras at the gate?" I told her yes. The HOA had them installed 2 years ago and bragged about them constantly. She grinned. "Then we're not just suing, we're broadcasting." Within 24 hours, Priya had filed an emergency preservation order for all surveillance footage from the gate. Karen refused to hand it over, claimed it was under review, claimed it was deleted. Then miraculously, it was recovered. Funny how that works. When Priya finally got her hands on it, she called me with 2 words. "It's gold." The footage showed Tom waving his gun like he was on a SWAT team, and the EMT stepping back with his hands raised. My voice could be heard on the intercom, screaming the code. My daughter's tiny cries could even be heard faintly through the open car door. The next step was the media. Priya handled it like a symphony. She reached out to a local reporter who specialized in suburban scandals. A piece ran within 3 days. Headline: Baby dies after HOA. Guard blocks EMT at gunpoint. Sub-headline: Security guard not licensed. HOA refuses responsibility. The story went viral. Comments exploded. The HOA's official page was flooded with rage. Karen turned off replies and went silent. But it was too late. The storm was already brewing. Then came the unexpected twist. I got a call from someone on the HOA board, David, the treasurer. He said he was devastated about what happened, and that he never agreed with Karen's security obsession. He said Tom wasn't even on the payroll officially, just under the table. David wanted to meet. I said no, I didn't want sympathy. I wanted depositions. But he dropped a bomb before hanging up. "Check the books," he said. "You'll find out why the cameras didn't get reviewed for 2 days. I asked what he meant. He said, "Let's just say Karen's been reallocating funds for a few pet projects." Then he hung up. That night, James and I dug through public financial records. Priya got access to HOA filings. And there it was. Tens of thousands of dollars categorized under community safety improvements had instead been spent on, among other things, a custom koi pond at Karen's house, branded gate signs from her cousin's printing company, and a security strategy consultant who turned out to be her nephew. Nepotism, fraud, misappropriation of funds, layer after layer of corruption that made everything that happened not just tragic but criminal. And just as I was getting ready to forward all this to Priya, a message popped up in the community Facebook group. A new post from Karen. It read, "Due to recent events, we are asking residents to refrain from publicly discussing HOA matters. Please remember our community values unity, not division. Anyone continuing to speak to outside parties will be reported for violation of conduct." Underneath it, a picture of my wife and me standing near the gate, taken without our knowledge. That's when it stopped being about grief. That's when it became war. I didn't respond to Karen's veiled threat. Not in the Facebook group. Not in person. Not even when one of her board members left a folded HOA violation slip on my porch that read, "Lawn edging not consistent with community design." My lawn edging hadn't changed. Nothing had. Except now I was public enemy number 1, and she was terrified. The slip was the opening shot. I hadn't planned on going nuclear this soon, but if she wanted to escalate things, I wasn't going to blink. Let her think she was still in control. That illusion would make the fall more satisfying. Priya's legal team had already drafted the lawsuit, and I was reviewing the first formal filing while my wife rocked silently in the nursery chair, the same one she sat in every night before the ambulance that wasn't. Her silence wasn't passive. It was fury wrapped in heartbreak, and she wanted a front row seat for everything that came next. She didn't even flinch when I told her we were naming the HOA board members individually in the suit. "Good," she said. "I want her to have to say our daughter's name in a courtroom." That was all I needed to hear. The lawsuit wasn't just civil, it triggered an entire wave of public scrutiny. Priya forwarded everything to a contact in the state attorney's office. Turns out, when a licensed EMT is held at gunpoint on private property while trying to render aid, and that obstruction results in a fatality. It crosses into criminal territory, especially when the so-called guard was operating without a license and a weapon registered in his brother-in-law's name. Tom had no permit, no training, no business touching a firearm, much less brandishing it in front of a medical responder during a literal code red. The sheriff's department started sniffing around quiet at first. An unmarked car parked across the street from the gate for a few days. Then came the subpoena. They wanted Tom's employment documents. Funny thing is, there were none. The HOA had paid him via monthly security consulting fees, tucked into the maintenance budget. It looked clean, until you noticed the checks were being cashed by someone with a different name than Tom. That little paper trail alone cracked the whole system wide open. Priya called it laundering light. I called it poetic. Tom didn't take it well. A week after the subpoena, he showed up at my garage while I was working on an old Dodge. I didn't see him until he was practically leaning over the hood. "You think you can ruin my life over a mistake?" he hissed. I didn't flinch. I calmly wiped my hands and said, "You pulled a gun on an EMT. The baby died. What do you think is supposed to happen?" He muttered something about how it wasn't like that, and that people don't understand the pressure. I just stared at him. He left, shaking, and 2 days later, I heard he'd been formally charged with obstruction, impersonating an officer, and unlawful possession of a firearm, and that was just the warm-up. Meanwhile, Karen had gone silent. Her weekly newsletters disappeared. Her Facebook posts vanished. Even her koi pond, according to a neighbor, had been mysteriously drained, but the damage was already done. After the news story went viral, residents started asking questions about the budget, about the cameras, about Tom's role, and how long Karen had let him play G.I. Joe on their dime. People weren't defending her anymore. They were scared. Scared of lawsuits. Scared of being dragged down with her. And scared that the HOA charter, the one that gave them their perceived power, was about to be used as evidence in open court. And then something beautiful happened. The treasurer, David, the same guy who tipped me off, resigned publicly in a letter posted to every mailbox in the community. He cited irreconcilable ethical conflicts and admitted he had deep concerns about funds being misused under Karen's leadership. That blew the dam wide open. 3 more board members followed suit within 48 hours, all of them throwing Karen under the bus on the way out. The board was collapsing from the inside, like a termite-infested shed. It was glorious. That same week, Priya scheduled a press conference, not a massive one, just a small podium outside the courthouse. She laid out the facts: child with a medical condition, emergency response blocked, security guard illegally armed, HOA leadership negligent and obstructive. It was clean, cold, and undeniable. And just when everyone thought it couldn't get worse for Karen, Priya dropped the footage. The gate camera played right there on a monitor. It showed everything, Tom pointing the gun. The EMT standing down, my voice shouting through the speaker. The car door open. The moment everything went still. The crowd didn't say a word during the clip, but the moment it ended, the questions started flying, reporters shouting over each other, some asking about criminal charges, others about civil liability. One even asked whether the HOA would be dissolved completely. Priya smiled. "We're not just suing," she said. "We're asking the court to dismantle the HOA entirely." Their actions weren't just immoral, they were structurally unsafe. Then she stepped down and let the fury grow on its own. Back in the neighborhood, things got tense. Some residents tried to act like none of this was their business, but most of them knew the storm was coming. A few whispered apologies to me at the grocery store. Others crossed the street to avoid eye contact, but I wasn't interested in their guilt. I was focused on the hearing date, the first of many, and I had one last card to play. A week before the hearing, I sent a certified letter to Karen's home. It wasn't from me, it was from the state. They'd found something in the budget audit, something that tied a fake contractor license to a pool installation, listed as a community wellness enhancement. The invoice was in Karen's name, paid for with HOA funds, installed at her address. Fraud, plain and simple. When the state investigator knocked on her door, she didn't answer. When the second notice was served, she lawyered up. When her lawyer called Priya and tried to negotiate a private settlement, Priya laughed. "Oh, honey," she said, "this isn't about money, this is about justice." And that was the moment I knew we had her boxed in. But it still wasn't enough. I needed one final nail, something poetic, something personal. So I pulled up every email Karen had ever sent me, all her complaints, her violations, her fake smiles, masked by condescending legalese. And I found it the very first message she ever sent me after we moved in. Subject line, "Let's start off on the right foot." She wrote, "This neighborhood is built on rules, and those who break them must be held accountable." So I printed it, blew it up on a poster board, and carried it into the courtroom on the day of our first hearing. Because if this was going to be war, I wanted her to read her own words while she lost everything. Courtroom air is different. It's colder, tighter, like it's been vacuum sealed around people who wear too much perfume and too much regret. I sat there in the front row, just behind Priya, watching Karen walk in like a ghost of herself. Gone were the pearls and pastels. She wore grey now, not stylish grey, surrender grey, the kind of grey you wear when your house is on the line, your name is in the news, and your pond has been officially declared unauthorized land use. She didn't look left or right, just marched forward like she might still bluff her way out. I almost admired the delusion. Almost. Tom wasn't there. He'd already pled out to avoid a longer sentence. Last I heard, he was trying to get work as a truck mechanic in a town 3 counties over, probably still wearing his tactical vest to bed. The remaining 2 board members showed up late, flustered, and carrying manila folders like they meant something. They didn't. The judge didn't even look at them when he entered. All eyes went to Karen. Her lawyer tried to start with some grand speech about unfortunate events and misunderstood intentions. But Priya shut it down with 2 words. Play tape. The footage ran again, this time in a courtroom, with every person silent, except for the distorted voice of my baby in the background, and Tom shouting about property rights with a drawn weapon. The judge paused after the video. Then he leaned forward and said, "I don't think I need a speech to understand what happened here." He called it negligence of the highest order. He said the HOA's behavior was not only unacceptable but actively dangerous. He cited their failure to comply with state licensing laws, their obstruction of emergency services, and their mishandling of private security. Then he said the thing I'd been waiting to hear for months. "I am dissolving this homeowners association, effective immediately." The words dropped like bricks. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Karen's face didn't move, but the flush in her cheeks told me the reality had finally hit. The judge went further. He ordered a financial audit of the HOA's accounts, authorized liens against Karen's property to recover misused funds, and opened the door for civil action from any resident affected by the policies of the now defunct board. In other words, Karen wasn't just out of power, she was out of protection. Her legal shield was gone, and her bank account was next. The best part, the final item on the judge's list. He ordered that the security shack at the gate be dismantled permanently, that it could no longer serve as a point of restriction or enforcement for any community member, and that all footage of the gate, past and future, be handed over to a third-party review board, pending further investigation. Karen flinched at that. She knew what else was on those tapes: gossip, petty vendettas, maybe even more cover-ups. The shack wasn't just a monument to their power, it was a vault of all their sins. And now it was getting cracked open. Outside the courthouse, the media had gathered again. This time, the headline read, "Judge dismantles HOA after baby's death, calls it negligence of the highest order." The clip made national news. My wife didn't speak during the interview, but she held my hand the entire time, knuckles white. When they asked me what I wanted to say to other communities dealing with corrupt HOAs, I didn't give them a soapbox speech. I just said, read the fine print, and if someone builds a fence between you and help, burn it down with the law. We didn't go back to the house right away. We stayed at a friend's cabin for a week, just to breathe different air. No HOA, no rules, just trees and quiet. I fixed a broken step on the porch. My wife planted a small bush in front of the kitchen window. It was the first time I saw her smile in weeks, a real smile, not the one she wore to survive. And I knew then we were going to be okay. Not whole, not healed, not ever fully the same, but okay. When we did return, everything had changed. The guard shack was gone. Bulldozed nothing but a patch of uneven dirt and a crooked pole where the keypad used to be. The new sign at the entrance was simple: metal, clean, bolted into stone. It read, "In memory of lives lost to arrogance. Emergency services welcome, always." It didn't have my daughter's name, that part was ours. Private, but it didn't need to. Everyone knew who it was for. The houses still stood, the lawns were still trimmed, but the power was gone. No more board, no more Karen. She moved out within the month. Her house sold quietly. The koi pond was filled in and covered with patchy sod. The mailbox out front, which used to hold her self-congratulatory newsletters, stood empty. I passed it once on a walk and saw the realtor sign leaning against it, cracked in two. I smiled. One by one, the remaining residents started talking again. No more silence, no more tight-lipped nods. They asked questions, thanked us, admitted they were scared. Some even apologized. I didn't hold grudges, not the petty ones, but I remembered every name, every message, every whisper that blamed us for making a scene. I didn't respond. I just let them live in the world they helped build. Now, without the fence, without the threat, without the queen bee ruling from her HOA hive, Priya closed the civil case with a win, a 7-figure settlement from the HOA's insurance bond, split between us and 2 other families who came forward with similar but quieter incidents. No deaths. Thank God, just harassment, neglect, medical delays, and one diabetic man who nearly lost a leg because an ambulance got rerouted. They'd all been too afraid to speak before, but now they had proof. My wife and I donated a chunk of the money to a foundation that supports emergency responders who deal with obstruction or assault in the field. We named it after our daughter. The day we moved out, I stood on the porch one last time and looked down the street that had cost me everything and given me back a purpose. The neighborhood looked the same, but it wasn't not anymore. The fear was gone. The silence had cracked, and the house that used to feel like a coffin now felt like a tombstone, a marker for a battle fought, a life lost, and a lesson carved in stone. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The gate was still open. The wind pushed it just slightly, like a gentle nod, and I whispered, mostly to myself, but maybe to something bigger, never again. Because if someone ever tries to gate off help, hide behind rules, and weaponize control again, I'll be waiting with receipts, a lawyer, and a story too loud to silence.